Hey everybody, that's right, no fancy intros, we're just going to get straight to it. I didn't think I was going to be making another video so soon, but I had sort of a content idea pop into my head the other day while I was reading the comments section on a video that AVS Forum had posted, and it was they were interviewing the prez of KScape, or Kalidescape, and the president was talking about how the size of the Mezzanine file that Kalidescape has delivered is up to 1 terabyte in size, whereas the size that KScape delivers to the people who use the service is usually in the vicinity of 60 gigabytes up to roughly around 100 gigabytes, depending on the movie. I think that captures the majority of the stuff on there, and that'll be for usually like your 4K HDR films. And so somebody was saying in the comment section, 1 terabyte? That is crazy. We're just getting scraps over here. And so I was trying to tell the person that the compression is actually quite impressive, and that I'd be shocked if you could tell the difference most of the time if you try to compare the compressed file versus the Mezzanine file, right? So that I wouldn't worry too much about it. And then they came back with a fairly strong concern that, look, man, the file size of this thing and the compression on it, in addition to the actual screen size that you view this on, is going to actually make a pretty big difference on what you're going to be able to see. And then I said again, you know what? I think that this might not necessarily be the case and something that you should worry about, but let me test that. Let me make a video about that so we can talk about this in a little bit more detail on all the things that are going on here. And who knows, maybe I'll eat crow. So, without further ado, let's get to the specifics. First off, we need footage. I can't use movies from actual Hollywood blockbusters because you'll get a copyright strike right away, guaranteed. So I shot my own. Shot it uncompressed, captured through HDMI, output from a Sony a7 IV onto a computer, and I shot it in S-Log3, and I graded it out from there to come up with some footage to play with at a high level of quality. Once I had all of my royalty-free footage shot at a high level quality, I edited it together, graded it, and exported it out at Mezzanine level quality file format. In this case, it was an Apple ProRes 422 10-bit file. At this level, I was getting 850 megabits per second bit rates out of the file, which is probably even slightly higher than the ones that are being provided to KScape, because this would result in considerably larger file sizes than 1 terabyte for a 2-hour film. I then attempted to approximate what Kalidescape uses when they do their encoding. I assume, of course, they have a dedicated compressionist who would do a far better job on a case-by-case basis, but according to their documentation, they use 442 10-bit chroma subsampling is 65 megabits per second. I'm going to go ahead and let some of the test footage play while I am talking about some basics of compression. I'll just simply say real fast, of course, that this video works best when you play it back in HDR off of YouTube and on an HDR display. And of course, you can't trust what you see on YouTube to a certain extent because of the compression that YouTube places on its videos, which is why I am including in a zipped file the original files that I used to do the comparison. You will find those links in the description below. The sample files that you can download in the links below, however, are shorter than the ones you see here simply because they are so incredibly large, roughly 2 gigabytes for only 20 seconds of video. In compression, you have some tricks that you can use to get almost virtually the same picture quality at smaller file sizes. They use a combination of iframes, P frames, B frames. So you'll have is predictive frames, those P frames that keep the redundant picture information that changes very little from one frame to the next in an attempt to save space. And then you have other things such as the iframes where it's rewriting the entire frame top to bottom as sort of a keyframe state. And those are the ones that take up much more file size as a result. So keeping that in mind, there are certain kinds of content that will stress test these file formats more than others. So for example, if you have a lot of motion going on with very, very dim shadows, that will torture test the compression capabilities more so. Or if you have a bunch of falling confetti and it's all one color, so the chroma subsampling gets exasperated, that would be another torture test. Okay, so I just quickly stacked these next to each other. Again, this is us battling against YouTube putting its own compression on top of everything else. So this is more about what to look for when you download the sample files. Okay, so what we're looking for here is the minute detail differences. For example, the one on the far left here, right here where I'm mousing over the cursor, you're going to see just a faint bit more detail left, right, and here than you might see over here. In addition to that, look at the hair right here. If you look very closely, it almost looks like it's been like hit with DNR, a little bit of digital noise reduction. But that's actually a telltale sign that there's a little bit too much compression that's been applied to the image. So what we're looking at here is over here, this is the Apple ProRes 850 megabits per second. In the middle, we have the 65 megabits per second, which is a little bit, it's trying to get close to the approximation of what your standard KScape file would be. And then over here is closer to what streaming is, where it's getting a little bit softer, but it's still pretty darn close. A lot of it has to do with the material, how good of a job the compressionist does, all that type of stuff. But I just wanted to put this exercise in front of everyone to realize that it's actually pretty darn close. When you're dealing with these things in reality, once you hit a certain level. In addition to that, if you look over here in something like this, for example, this kind of scene would be next to impossible to tell if you looked at all three of these side by side, because you've got bright colors, you don't have like big obvious fields of solid color, so you don't see macro blocking as easily or banding or anything like that. It's a very, it plays to the strengths of how compression works, right? So we have this going on here, but maybe you could look even like over here. If you look at something like the highest bitrate file that's been provided, look in these areas roughly right about here or even right here. You would be looking for almost what looks like very faint mosquito digital noise. That's something that you will see in theatrical films as well, if they haven't had like severe digital noise reduction placed on them. You won't see that as much on the lower compression files, or excuse me, the higher compression files. What ends up happening is it requires more bitrate for some of that digital noise to be described correctly, and it disappears and it becomes softer looking as a result. And that's a telltale sign that the amount of compression that you put on it has gone too far. So there you have it. That's what I was able to come up with my testing. I know it's not completely ideal to not have an actual movie to play with, but those are impossible to get by without getting copyright strikes to talk about with in too much detail. But hopefully examples like this could potentially alleviate concerns beyond a certain threshold. But yeah, go ahead and, like I said in the rest of the video, I have a link to the actual files that you can download, very small samples of it because they are so large, but you could throw those up on the highest resolution, biggest resolution display that you've got, run those back to back, and see if you come to any similar conclusions that I did, or maybe you have some disagreements or some different ways that you might run the test. Nothing wrong with that. Leave your grievances in the comment section below if you like, and yeah, we'll check you next time. Thanks.